The following audio-supported podcast is intended for informational and educational purposes only and is not intended as medical advice. Please speak to a healthcare professional before making any treatment decisions. The guests on today's show were paid to participate in this podcast.
Hey Thal Pals, it's your friend and fellow patient advocate, NinaMaria, and I'm here with my co-host, Dr. Kevin Kuo. You're listening to Thal Pals, the Alpha Beta Revolution. Today, we're switching it up a bit, and Kevin is going to interview me as the guest about my experience as someone with transfusion-dependent thalassemia. I know that some of you may be considering starting transfusions or getting more frequent transfusions, and hopefully my experiences can be a little more helpful in that decision-making process. Kevin, why don't you take it away?
Thanks, NinaMaria. So tell me, you have had transfusions for a very, very long time now. And so what are you grateful about, when it comes to getting transfusions, the role that transfusion plays in your life?
Well, First and foremost, I'm grateful that it exists and that we have the knowledge that we have and know how impactful that transfusion can be. I think as someone who's been getting them my whole life, it's become such part of my routine. And it wasn't until I was older where I realized that, this is a really big part of my life. And, I always say that everyone has their own struggles, and I'm just grateful that mine has this solution and that, yes, I go in every 4 weeks, but it could be, worse. It could be more invasive things, So I'm just grateful for the treatment itself and that it allows me to feel more whole.
Agios is a biopharmaceutical company that's fueled by connections with patient communities, healthcare professionals, partners, and each other. Building on these connections and the company's unmatched leadership in PK activation, Agios is pioneering therapies for rare blood disorders, including PK deficiency, thalassemia, and sickle cell disease. To learn more about thalassemia, visit rethinkthalassemia.com. To join the conversation with other patient allies, follow us on Instagram at Ally Voices Rising. That's Ally, A-L-L-Y, Voices Rising.
And so what would you say are some of the logistical challenges that you experience when, with transfusions?
I would say, there's a lot of little moving parts that you might think about. I think scheduling is a big one. It doesn't sound like it. Obviously transfusions and my health come first. And so the priority goes on making time to go through that process. But it's hard sometimes with work, social life. There are times where it gets in the way and it sucks, missing out on certain experiences and kind of struggling with having to miss work and hoping that it doesn't look bad or, people don't think certain things. I think that's a big part of it. And just, it takes time. It takes certainly the whole day. But, for some folks, the day prior or the day after. So it takes a chunk out of your life. And I think that can be difficult to balance.
I can see that the juggling act can often be quite difficult. So if you can reduce the transfusion frequency, go to transfusion less often, or maybe have a shorter duration of transfusion, what would you do with that extra time?
That's a great question. It's funny because on my transfusion days, I always go in thinking, I'm going to be sitting there all day. I'll bring work. I'll get things done. I'll do things, knock some stuff off of my list. Mm-hmm. And when I get there, I have no energy, no motivation, no push to do any of it. And I never do. Every time, I don't know why I think I will. So I think for me, it's that time is really not useful to me. Mm-hmm. And just having that day to get more tasks, crossed off of my list or, being able to be, more present at work or, just those other events that I might miss, I think That's how I would use my time and hopefully be more productive.
Sometimes I do wonder if what you're feeling there is physiological, meaning that that's actually the time when your hemoglobin is the lowest.
Yeah. I think, logically that's so true. And we just don't think about it. Like that is my low point. And I think too, the week prior to my transfusion, that's kind of also time taken away because oftentimes I feel more tired and I don't have the motivation to get everything done that I want to. So if I didn't have transfusions or had less frequent ones, that would also be time spent, in areas where I'd like to. I think, especially that last day, it's like my body's just done. I'm ready for new blood.
Completely. And I think a lot of people forget that when red blood cells, from transfusion enter the body, they don't go into work right away. They need to warm up first, literally.
Yeah, actually, that's something that I wanted to ask you about because, my friends and family, they all know, about my transfusions and they're like, oh, it's your blood day. Like you'll be feeling better, before you know it. And it's true. But also I'm like, they're always like, so how do you feel? And I'm like, I still feel tired. I'm like, I can't tell you exactly the point in which I'll be good. But I don't know. It feels like a slower transition, but do you have any light to shed on that? Kind of like when patients start to kind of feel that new energy and that new blood?
Yeah, there's no sort of defining point, but from a sort of scientific perspective, we know that because the blood, as you know, is stored in a cold temperature, and so they become what we call metabolically inactive. So they're essentially sleeping. And then so when they enter the bloodstream, right, they need to warm up first, and then they need to start getting the nutrients as well. Even though there are nutrients available inside each packed red cells, it's just different than, say, being in the homey environment of a human body. And so the red cells need to sort of, warm up and wiggle itself. Usually that takes around 24 hours, people say. Could take longer, could take shorter, who knows? But especially in the body, no one has actually studied that. But yeah, I think what you're experiencing sort of correlates well with what we see scientifically.
Yeah, I love how you explain things so relatable. They warm up in the body. Like, oh yeah, that makes sense. Like I sleep too when I'm cold, right? Yeah. I think too that's such a good point because that transfusion day, like, sure, the blood is in my body. I'm still sleeping all day. Mm-hmm. Like, count me out. The day is done. Mm-hmm. So. I think that's really interesting to kind of think about that timeline. Tell
me about sort of a typical day of your transfusion, from start to finish.
Sure. So for me, I like to try to start early because it's a long day. So I'll probably get up around 7 a.m., put on comfy clothes, and usually I'll go with somebody. Someone will take me because I take Benadryl in case of a reaction, so I get extra sleepy. Mm-hmm. And then, I'll head to the clinic. Like a typical doctor's office, you have to wait for them to be ready for you. And then, once I get in, they'll draw blood, wait for my counts to come back. I try to get comfy and just sit tight, and then they order the blood, which can also take, an hour or two. Hopefully that's it, sometimes longer if I have an antibody. And then I finally get the blood, and that could take 2, 3, 4 hours, depending on how many bags. And also I think, it depends on the clinic that you're in. Some have rules about how quickly or how slowly at what rate they can give the blood. And at that time, I usually take a nice little nap and, let the nurses do their thing, take my vital signs and all of that. And then I would say typically I get in around 8:30, and I probably am done around, again, it really depends on the day. I would say between like 2 and 4. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So for our listeners who do not have thalassemia, I want to sort of give them an analogous example of how you feel during the day with all that waiting. Would you say it's very close to, say, flying, like going to the airport, having to wait, having to clear security, and then having to wait again for the plane, and then, once you get to the plane, you need to take a big snooze? Would you say that's sort of analogous to it?
Yeah, I've never thought about it like that, but that's actually like pretty accurate comparison. Yeah, a lot of like, do this, wait, and you're finally at your destination, or you're in your journey, and a nice nap. At least for me, that's what I like to do during my transfusion.
Me too. I like to take a nice nap right after the flight. I guess the way we can put it to our listeners is that you want to do things, but you really can't, because you don't know when the next step is going to be, isn't it?
Yeah, and that's the thing too, for maybe some folks who can get things done on that day. It's kind of hard to try to balance, when the doctor is going to come in, when the nurse is going to come in, when they have to do this, when they have to do that. So it seems like a lot of time, but the way that it's broken up, things take time to do.
Mm-hmm. So do you have any tips for someone who's considering starting transfusion?
Yeah, definitely. I think, well, firstly, you're doing something you're not used to, and it's new. Anything new is a little scary and takes adjusting. So definitely give yourself the time to adjust and find your own schedule. I kind of gave you a brief overview of my schedule, but other patients, it might look different for them, and they might do things differently. Find what works for you on that day. And I think my biggest point of advice is give yourself grace. I will admit that my transfusion days are probably my crankiest days. And I notice that because I'm tired, and sometimes I'm hungry, and, it's been a whole month or whatever point of time, I need blood. And so, when your basic needs aren't fully met, you get cranky, and that's okay. It's okay to be uncomfortable and to baby yourself a little bit. Lean on your friends and family. If you're able to, allow them to take care of you. Lean on your care team, your nurses, your doctors. Tell them how you feel, because they're there to help you. And just give yourself grace. It's okay, if you don't get your tasks done. It's okay if you didn't send that email. It's okay if you didn't, clean your room before you left. Like, it's okay. Give yourself grace. Take the day.
So well said. Give yourself grace. I love it. And you talk about the so-called Maslow's hierarchy, right? You got to satisfy the basic needs first before you can pursue something that's even more complex. Amazing.
Before we close up, I want to ask you, at what point would you recommend patients get transfusions? And then when you guys do just make that decision, how do you prepare them for that?
Yes. Well, there are a number of reasons why we would start transfusions. And people, as you know, start transfusions at different time points, right, in their life. And I think it's important to recognize that there's no one size fits all. And in my opinion, I think it needs to be very sort of symptom directed, right? How you feel, as you have said, right? It's and also to think about how transfusions can change the way you feel. But more importantly is to prevent a lot of the chronic complications that we often see in people with thalassemia who do not get regular transfusions. And those are the sort of the long-term gains that is most beneficial for people with thalassemias. And I think, during during someone's lifespan with thalassemia, it's important to always keep in contact with the doctors, even though you're not being transfused regularly, because having that connection allows you and the doctor to discuss, well, you know what, I'm starting to see that I could head into the direction of developing complications. Let's prevent those from happening, before it does. As we all know from, the medical literature that, people, for every drop in 1 gram per deciliter of hemoglobin means that you're at higher risk of developing multiple complications than thalassemia. So we often want to prevent things from happening before they occur.
Another challenge I think that it's important to highlight is financial challenges. I think, everyone kind of has their own way of dealing with things, and we have insurance, but insurance isn't easy to deal with, and it doesn't cover everything. And so it can be really frustrating to have a treatment that you need, and you know you need, and your doctor knows you need, but you still have to pay for it, and you still have to find the finances for it, even though no one else needs to pay for their energy. So I think that's something we need to highlight in the community and just be aware of, because transfusions are extremely important, and we need to make sure that everyone has access to them who needs them.
Thank you for sharing your perspective as both a co-host and as a guest of Thal Pals. And I think, both providers as well as patients really can benefit from hearing your lived experience and also how you deal with sort of the day-to-day in and out details of managing your transfusions. So don't forget, to like and subscribe to the show. And I'll see you next time at Thal Pals, the Alpha Beta Revolution.